Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Hello, Oscar. Oscar. Ogwan.
Hello.
All right, we are recording in our fitness gym, home gym area as usual. And not sure this is going on video, but we're recording it anyway just in case. But it's been a couple weeks since a podcast has dropped. We were going pretty strong for May. I had a lot in the queue from our travels, and then we got back and it's been a little hectic. So I am doing better about self-care and not pushing myself to keep up the insane schedule of a weekly podcast for the past 7 years or so. But there's a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot of our students who are continuously coming to train, and we thought we would kind of have a chat today about kind of our martial art values and how we're seeing things through our lens, and I just really wanted to make you sit in the studio with me so I didn't have to do my hip lifts today. Instead, we can podcast.
Okay. I love that.
It's called avoidance.
Yes. Avoidance of?
Working out. It's this misconception that as Kung Fu teachers, or as you are a fitness professional, that I'm just speaking for myself. I love working out and all I want to do all day is exercise, where sometimes I just want to drink a cup of tea.
I enjoy working out a lot, but I think I would enjoy eating cookies more.
But lately, and my Patreons know this, shout out to all of you, I have been making protein cookies. So those don't count towards being a treat. They're healthy because there's protein.
Absolutely. Anything that has protein in it, doesn't matter the sugar, fat content, you're good to go. That's science-backed information.
Well, if you're saying it and this is being recorded and it will go on the internet, it's obviously true.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyways, you and I always have these conversations, these philosophical conversations over breakfast or dinner. Not really, they're usually very silly. But we do have the privilege and benefit of being surrounded by all of these humans that show up to sweat in the 100-degree weather that it feels like it is in the temple until we turn on that big ass fan. And by the way, it's actually called big ass fan. I'm not just being derogative. It's a big ass fan. That's the name of the company, and it really does drop the temperature quite a bit, but it is hot regardless at the Wah Lum Temple these days. And I'm honestly kind of amazed every summer when I go, wow, the students are still showing up to train. That's awesome. It must mean we're awesome.
Yeah. It's a guarantee of our awesomeness by students showing up.
Well, a lot of non-martial artists always ask and say, hey, how or why do people continuously show up to the temple? And what is it about the temple? Or what is it about Wah Lum that is this kind of unique art where Grandmaster Chan started this 55 years ago now in the United States, and it is this ongoing legacy. And I recently have been pulling snippets from Pui Chan Kung Fu Pioneer and thinking about his philosophy and why he chose America as the place to establish this traditional Kung Fu system. And honestly, he didn't really choose it for the Kung Fu system, but he chose it as where he wanted to live, where he thought he would be able to thrive and have a home and build a family. But the Kung Fu part that seed was there, and it just kind of grew from that. I don't think it was his intent when he was sailing, but it made me kind of think a lot about my family, my heritage, my upbringing, and like what does that mean for me? Very esoteric questions coming into my head. But you and I talk a lot about the core values at our school. We are very fortunate to be able to kind of try to practice what we preach because we're constantly teaching students our core values, what that means, what it means to be a traditional martial artist, and kind of in this global context, what it means to be American. And you and I are always discussing these type of things. So
Yeah, I was thinking while you were saying that I would start with, as we've said before, but then I realized that it's probably extremely rare that people have listened to a lot of our conversations, right? Or remember them. It's a little bit
just a few of you, you know who you are.
Probably a few of you, right? But it's so rare that people listen consistently to the same thing, or to assume that all of the times that we've spoken that people remember that. So I'm going to try to not say as I've said a million times before moving forward. But ultimately, anytime that we have conversations, it comes down to believing that the things that we're trying to teach, we're teaching ourselves, because we realize that we've faulted so many times. We haven't upholded things that we're saying that we're asking students to do things and we don't necessarily do it all the time.
Are you saying we're not perfect?
I would never say. What I would say is that you are almost perfect.
Well, I think this is one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, was this misconception of, one, that we are perfect, or we're definitely not pretending to be perfect, or we don't perceive ourselves as such, but also that we don't expect perfection from our students.
We expect effort.
Expect effort and excellence. There's nothing wrong with expecting excellence and expecting our students to not just reach their potential, but maybe even surpass their potential, and kind of imagine what that is. But I think this word perfection can be really stress-inducing. Students get worried about taking tests. We've had some students lately, from little tiny students to senior members, and just going, oh man, I don't want to take this test. So I think there's this misconception that we expect perfection. And then maybe there's a misconception that because we're the teachers, we are already perfect. But like you just said, we say this all the time, but our kind of goal at Wah Lum is first to better yourself. So Grandmaster Chan wrote a kind of philosophy book, where actually he did a series of lectures through the 70s that was transcribed and made into a philosophy book on all these lectures. And it's just all the time, what is the reason you should study martial arts, in his opinion? What is the main goal? And it's always kind of to better yourself. But then we can kind of take that as a diving off point to consider, what does that really mean? Yes, we're bettering ourselves. Physically, we're trying to be stronger. We're trying to be better at martial arts. And in terms of internally and who we are, we're just trying to become better people. But as teachers now, we have a secondary responsibility, which is what do we want from our students? We're not really actually asking for perfection, but I think we're asking them to do the same, which is to better themselves so that they can go out and also spread all of that goodness in the world. So I think one of the things that is a little unique about Wah Lum is that we do recite the martial arts altar every day, which is to respect and learn kindness and fellowship and hard work and control and patience, and kind of thinking about that historical value. And so one time someone came in and was like, oh wow, you guys have peacock feathers on the top, which means you're a strong school and you accept challenges. And I feel like in ancient China, that meant something a little different than it does here, how I interpret it anyway. But competition is definitely where we go out, we do tournaments, we compete, and there's competition with others. But I think something you brought up recently was but that also is competition within yourself. So it doesn't always mean that you're combative in nature.
Yeah, I remember that gentleman who came in and said, oh, you guys throw down like that. And the thing is, this guy, have you ever seen Friday, the old movie? He was built like Debo.
Like Debo?
Just
and I'm like,
yeah. And I was like, I said, I wouldn't really throw down like that, if you catch my drift. But I think it would be to that point, disingenuous or unrealistic to say, yep, come on in, we're going to close the doors and battle anyone who comes in. It's just crazy.
Or come outside and someone like jumps up and takes the sign from the top of the school and like breaks it and be like, I challenge you to a fight.
Yeah, it makes for a great movie or TV show, but you don't want to end up in any kind of jail or, incarcerated. Not fun. So there's that part, but the competition part, I think to your point of thinking about what's going on everywhere, the Wah Lum Temple, we're located in Orlando, Florida, in the United States, and you and I both, both of our parents came here for certain things, for American values and American ideals, and this may sometimes feel like we're finding the arrow stuck somewhere and then we're painting the bullseye afterwards. But the truth is that a lot of the values that we instill through Wah Lum are American ideals and American values of decency and respect and honoring and competition, right? Healthy competition, but also looking at being this united front, as a school, and looking around and saying, oh, we have all of these really diverse students, all different types of ages and backgrounds and their own philosophies, everything that they bring into it. So whenever we look at the microcosm of Wah Lum, it is a microcosm of the United States. And so in the same way that we try to instill these martial arts values and fail ourselves to always uphold them all the time, that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying. And I think it's the same way that if we truly believe in whatever our American ideals and American values, even if we're failing, we should still try to work towards implementing them.
One of the things I think people know is, of course, like, why did Grandmaster Chan come here? And I think even why did Simo Suzy come here? Because there's a documentary on it. And so it makes it super easy to kind of dissect that. And people have heard about it and whatnot. But I think people maybe don't know about your family. And so it's interesting as you and I are at a certain age where I consider my parents to be, of an elderly generation, but they're very spirited and very, still very full of spirit. But you start to listen to stories more from the grandparent generation, right? You start to go, hey, so, what was it like growing up, et cetera, et cetera. So when I think about why my father came here and why my mom came here, they're very similar, right? So opportunity, because the countries they were coming from, there was an opportunity, or there was literally something they needed to kind of get. My dad was escaping, to get over to America and build something meaningful, having freedom, literally. For my mom from Jamaica, I think it was mainly opportunity and this just exciting adventure to go out and do something more than being on this island where there was just more limitations. But obviously for my dad, Grandmaster Chan, it was freedom, and it was to come to America in this place that was almost like a fairy tale book thing, like you hear about. And I feel every immigrant story is interesting anytime I've ever spoken to anybody. So kind of what do you know of, like, why your parents said, hey, we're gonna come here and this is where we're gonna have our family?
I don't know much, actually. And it's my fault, I think, in my family, but particularly me, I don't ask a lot of those questions. Mm-hmm. I don't go to my mom and say, hey, so why did you decide to come here? But for example, every Sunday my mom comes here and we walk around the neighborhood and we just talk more about conversations that come up. I'm more like, oh, you know what? I remember, she'll say something like, I remember when I was young in the Dominican Republic and I climbed up this mango tree with my friend, and this crazy old drunk guy came by and we threw a mango on his head and felt bad about it, and he was like, what the heck's happening? Where are these mangoes? Why are these mangoes? Things like that. Or the other day we were walking, and when I walk with her, I can't just walk straight. I have to sometimes walk backwards, or I walk on the edge of the curb balancing. And then she says, when I was young, I would walk like this. And she started walking in the zigzag pattern. So those are the type of things that I'm interested in, but I still don't. I guess it's just not in my style always to ask good questions.
Yeah.
And I would freely admit, I think that's a fault of mine, not being good at being super curious about other people. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious about life. Like, I'm curious about a lot of things, But a lot of times when I am speaking with people, I have to intentionally be curious. So, and I haven't intentionally been curious and asked my parents specifically, "Hey, why did you decide to come here?" I just assume. I just assume it's a better for a better life because from both of their sides, they came from really, really poor backgrounds in the Dominican Republic and moved here, right? So
Were family members already here, or were your,
so this is if ever any of my cousins, on my uncle's, my dad's side, especially the female cousins, they'd be like, I can't believe that Oscar doesn't know this, because I remember we would have conversations and I asked something. I don't even remember what it was. And they were like, seriously, you don't know that? Something about like someone who I thought was my aunt, like literally my dad's blood sister. They're like, no, that's not really his sister. That's like a cousin who ended up living there. You didn't know this.
So basically, listeners, so Oscar was probably eating voraciously when these conversations were happening, or reading.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like I said, I don't think of this as a positive thing. It probably is something that I need to work on, which is being more curious and inquisitive about the reasons why people did the things that they did. But I believe that my grandfather came here first.
Okay.
And then he was working like as a busboy or something.
Yeah.
And he was saving as much money as he could, and then he brought my dad and his siblings.
Yeah.
And my grandma. And on my mom's side, I'm not sure.
I think what's really interesting about our Wah Lum system as a traditional Chinese martial arts system is we're upholding this heritage and culture and the philosophies, and we're like holding on to all of these things and trying to pass them forward and teach them. But at the same time, I feel like it is very uniquely American, because my father always has on the shirts, Wah Lum Kung Fu of USA. Like, it's a very specific, I guess branding is the right word, but it's a very specific message that he always wanted to be identified as an American. Like, it was a very proud moment when they both became citizens, and they're like, no, this is the country we choose to be a part of, while still upholding culture, heritage, tradition, and identity. And I think that is something that we all struggle with. But what's interesting is at the Wah Lum Temple itself, and many of our other Wah Lum schools, it's just a huge, diverse student body where you've got ages, you've got different backgrounds, and you're always hearing all these different things. But I think what's fascinating is the parallels, like you said, between the values of why immigrants have come here, like our parents, or why we choose to be here, is very in line with a lot of our martial arts values. I think there's a misconception about martial artists, or especially in Wah Lum, we are very much also a performance art. Like, there's a big part of our style that thrives on lion dances and performing different artistic interpretations of shows and showcases, and kind of sharing the art in that way. And I think people kind of think, oh, maybe that means we're there to show off as martial artists, or that's the goal. And I feel like it's important that it is said of, no, like, the martial art value is to better ourselves, but also to help those around us and to kind of pay it forward. Like, us as teachers, we're constantly trying to teach lessons that we're also teaching ourselves. Like, everything we say is being said to, I'm speaking for myself, I'm saying it to myself first, in order to then go, okay, now I expect this of the students, and here's what I want you to learn, because it's what I'm also simultaneously learning. And the character, and being able to kind of sleep at the end of the day and feel good about the character that you are building and the person that you're becoming. So I think when you said, hey, you guys throw down like that, or, when you kind of had that interaction, like, yes, there's a self-defense aspect. Yes, but the word self-defense is opposite of offense. And I think that's where there's a little bit of disconnect on perception. And I think that self-defense and, being offensive is kind of where us as leaders, us as martial artists, need to be the ones who are, I think you always say, the adult in the room. We have to be the ones that aren't petty. We have to be the ones that maybe sometimes have to stay calm. You're really good at that. I'm not as good at staying calm, but staying calm. And we talk about rooting in martial arts, which is where you literally imagine yourself to be a tree and the roots go into the ground and you ground yourself, and being grounded and rooted and just we're the ones that have to kind of embody those characteristics. And to embody those characteristics and to be a true martial artist is to be the adult in the room, to be calm and not to escalate situations. And I think you often say, yeah, we're there to actually de-escalate situations. We actually saw Grandmaster Chan de-escalate
all the time.
millions of times.
Yeah, so part of it is I actually, when you're practicing Kung Fu or Tai Chi, but I love the martial art intention, and sometimes that intention is violent movement.
Very violent movement.
You know, and an aggressive movement. But behind that intention of a martial intent and violent movement, it's supported by the philosophies, like our first philosophy of respect and humility and all that, right? So it's this kind of balancing act that we're constantly doing of, well, yes, we're martial artists, we're going to move with this violent intent. You know, when you're sparring someone, if you're just doing technical sparring, it's one of the most fun things ever, where you're like, oh, tagging, boom, and then practicing skills, or you're practicing self-defense applications. It can not only be where you're like, wow, this could be turned into this violent movement, but also extremely fun, as long as behind all of that, there's this respect part. And the role that you look as a leader, and it could be the leader because you're an instructor at a school, a leader because you lead a business, because you lead a country, because you, for whatever it is, a lot of times those leaders are not called upon to become, I'm going to end this fight with violence. They're called upon to be like, oh, I'm actually the grown-up and the adult in the room, and I'm going to de-escalate. And that de-escalation is a huge strength. You know, to use your father as an example, you know, he would always say stuff like that. Real martial artists, you don't seek to fight. You seek to end things in a calm way, clarity, control. And I think this world, unfortunately, right now is rewarding loudness. Like, who's the loudest? And that's unfortunate, but in our own little world of Wah Lum, we can continue to say, no, we're going to build leaders that lead with a little bit more of a grounded leadership, and more centered, and more with this basis of respect and humility. But when it comes down to it, you can turn the switch, right? You have the training to say, okay, now is the time for this. But it's so rare when that's needed, right? Like me, multiple times stepping out of my car to confront someone who's cut me off, not to be aggressive, but to de-escalate it. It could have switched the other way, you know? I have 3 brothers, so I'm not going to say which one, but he's one of them multiple times stepped out of his car and violently ended confrontations. And he always regretted it, always. There's never been a time that he's been happy about what that situation was when you end a confrontation violently, because you know deep down inside that wasn't the right way to do it, right? So those are not only like American values, those are just like human values.
Yeah, and people, when I was growing up in school, and they always inevitably would find out I did martial arts, because it's just half the clothes I owned was all Wah Lum clothes. But also when you're in a small Orlando community at that time, it was the 80s, and everybody knew the temple because it was like the only kind of building structure that looked like this Chinese temple in the middle of Orlando, Florida. And so it was kind of known. And I always get the question of like, okay, what would you do if somebody attacked you? But also, hey, have you ever been in a fight? And it's interesting because I know that this was my answer, but I also know it's because I heard my father say these type of things all the time in a philosophical way. Like, to be a martial artist is to have ability and never have to really be able to implement it. Like, your self-defense should be avoiding a fight. You should be able to avoid the confrontation or the fight and de-escalate. He would always say, like, hey, how do you avoid it? How do you win a fight? And it's like, well, you avoid the fight. You avoid getting into the conflict. And so, but then the self-defense part is, no, if someone is attacking you, you have a right to make sure that you have the ability to keep your family safe, etc. But you're right, it's such a different kind of philosophy from like, we're here, we're going to be the loudest person in the room, and we're going to be aggressive and intimidating and bullying, and those are the opposite of martial art values. Like we literally have some classes where we're like, okay, today's the anti-bullying for the kids. And honestly, we should probably do it for the adults so that they know how to deal with bullies and so that they then recognize, am I being a bully? Am I being intimidating and trying to have power over others? And so I think that it's essential for us to kind of draw those parallels because as martial artists, we have a responsibility to be, like you said, the adult in the room, but also to kind of live by a certain code. You might as well say, like, I guess the samurais had a code, and like all these like legendary martial art based kind of groups always had kind of a code of conduct or something that you kind of live by. And for us, it's our martial arts altar, our philosophy, our martial arts philosophy, and really identifies us. And so one of the things I think that's also essential to Wah Lum is we start each class with lighting the incense. And so when we light the incense, we're paying homage to our ancestors, to taking a moment of gratitude, to saying, oh man, we're so thankful not just to be here and have the privilege of training, but thank you to everybody who made this happen. And that's a very kind of, like you said, human value, like to just go, wow, thank you for this. Like there's just that common decency of being grateful for people that have been helpful or people that have passed on knowledge. And if we don't take kind of that moment to express that gratitude, then we really can't learn openly. Like our minds probably aren't going to be able to learn and absorb the lessons that we are there to receive.
Yeah, it makes me think about this idea of what we're trying to instill in people in doing martial arts. But I was having this conversation with one of our students. I was driving her. This is your intern. Intern?
Intern, personal assistant, yes.
And she was telling me about how she doesn't know if she enjoys music as much as she does and whatnot. And anyway, towards the end of the conversation, I was saying, well, the crazy thing is that there's this book by Adam Gopnik about art. I forget the title, but it's about, how to be an artist. And that can be a musician, it can be a martial artist, it can be whatever. But that really the beauty of all of it, or the purpose of all of it, is sharing it with other people, right? So like, it doesn't matter if you're the best violinist ever. If you're only doing it for yourself, then nobody cares. And the same thing especially with martial arts, right? Like there are set fight sets that you do that when you're sparring, you're interacting with other people. Even if you were doing the traditional like forms, when you're doing them, your imaginary opponents that you're interacting with, everything that you do, the beauty of all of it is only there because it's being done with other people. And when we look at, unfortunately, the type of things, it's almost like we're going backwards with what is sometimes being promoted. Like I said, the loudness being promoted. And as much as me as a young boy loved growing up and watching these shows of strength that like the early 1980s showed, the quote, which is, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, to drive them before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. That's Conan the Barbarian. Right? Like, I love that, but that's really not the way like we should be living our lives. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes leadership is being shown that way now. Like in the 80s, it's like, oh, what's show the biggest muscles, right? And now we're in 2025, and it's like,
so you're saying Rambo draw first blood isn't probably the best philosophy?
No, I mean, listen, I think I love those movies, and I rewatched them. I watched them so many times. I'm not saying that there's not value there. I'm saying if you then build your entire philosophy around that, you might have some problems. You might have some problems. But I think because a lot of young men too are being isolated and staying inside their computers or their phones, and then they're being fed whatever algorithm feeds them. This is what masculinity is. If they're not exposed to, no, really what it's all about is being able to interact with people, other men, other women, other people of all kind, different backgrounds and like being like, let's do things together, right?
Yes,
To all
yes.
like better ourselves. But I think that I could be wrong, right? I think that there's probably too much of the voices of like, no, you need to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando.
No tears, Oscar, and no yelling, no emotion. Be stoic.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that my dad instilled in us. And my dad had a ton of great things that he instilled in us. Like, he was, I would say, the adult in the room that came in and de-escalated. The calming.
You mean four boys who were barely a year apart and were like wreaking havoc?
But
I think they needed an adult in the room.
he was, do not show any emotion.
Yes.
And so,
yes.
so you have to balance things out, right? And all of us, we work with the skills that we have, and we do the best that we can that we have. So I don't look back and go, oh,
Thanks, Dad.
this was wrong for you to do that.
Yeah.
I look back and go, man, I really am lucky that I actually had a father who was there to take care of me.
And
right?
I think also though, there's no one does everything right. We talked earlier in this episode about perfection. There's no perfect parenting. There's no perfect being a child or a teenager or an adult human. There's no perfection there. And so whatever lessons we have, whether something was taught to us incorrectly or correctly, we have a chance to course correct. We have a chance to reflect on a situation or an upbringing or a philosophy that we learned. And then we have, as more information comes to us, go, well, was this right or was this wrong? Is this, or it could have been right for the time and wrong for this time. Like with time, things change and situations change. So we have to be adaptable. We have to be flexible. We have to be able to know that tradition doesn't just mean we have to do something because that's the way it's always been done and there's no room for any variance of that. Tradition means we're upholding values like respect and humility and kindness and fellowship and hard work, and those values don't have to change. The values, but how we get there can change. The approach to teaching, the approach to training can change. So I feel like people get stuck with, well, I hate tradition because that's being stuck in the old ways and there's no room for evolving. And I think there's a misconception of, well, we're a traditional Chinese martial arts system. And while we uphold the values and the core of what that is, we can also be flexible and adapt and learn new ways of teaching and coaching and cueing and being better communicators, but while still saying, hey, this is a traditional martial arts system, so there are things that we expect. And there are values that we don't want to throw out the window, because if we throw everything out the window,
Throw the baby out with the bathwater.
that's right, then everything is gone, right? And so there's no integrity. So I think that we often forget that, yes, we're a traditional Chinese martial arts system. What does that mean? And does that mean we're rigid? Well, it means that we have guidelines. It means we have rules. It means we have structure. But it doesn't mean we're not flexible. But I think sometimes we could go the other way now, too flexible. Like we want to be casual and let's just all wear whatever we want, learn whatever we want, ask our teachers whatever we want. And so like there's such a difficult line. When I first started filming the documentary and writing it, one of the things I was exploring was how to keep tradition alive in a modern world. And that theme has changed for me. The question and the answer has changed so much, because for me it's not just like, oh, how do I keep Wah Lum to be being taught? Like that's the basic part of it, but I think holding on to the positive, but also being able to not go too far into like, well, now it's not even recognizable. Like there's a really fine line, and it's one that we're constantly exploring and trying to figure out. Like we're not perfect on this, but I think our version of these values and our version of the interpretation of this philosophy is that we are going to do the best we can to better ourselves and better our students, and so that our students can go out there and also help other people and be better in society for other people and be better humans, and that kind of, what's it called, snowball effect, right?
Yeah.
That's a positive snowball effect where we send out good energy. And it's frustrating when there is negativity in the world and that becomes the conversation. I'm like, well, I think if we just focus on the positive things that we can do and what we do have control over, then we'll be a little bit less crazy.
I don't know if I'm a good listener because you're saying all these things and I had like 20 different thoughts. So
Go.
I
I need to drink my tea.
first, I think if you look at a lot of the problems that we have in America or the world where people are divisive, we just need to all watch the early 1980s movie Shaolin versus Wu-Tang. Because let me tell you what happens in Shaolin versus Wu-Tang, okay? Shaolin, hand-to-hand combat, shaved heads. Okay, that's one team. Wu-Tang comes down, long hair, working with the double-edged sword, with the game. You're bad. No, you're bad. Turns out, at the end, spoiler alert, they unite forces and really beat up the bad guys. So, Shaolin versus Wu-Tang. That's one part, okay? Now that was like glaring in my mind, and I was like, it's gonna derail me from everything else that I wanted to say. But that's one part. The other thing is this concept that you were bringing up about, I think can be summed up in like, yes, we're honoring the past, but we're building on the future. And if you look at some of the things that are happening here in the United States, is this idea of let us keep enriching the old and kind of forgetting about the future.
Like they're on their own.
And it's a huge, I'm not an expert in this, right? But to me, it seems like what's going to happen is this huge transfer of wealth from poor to rich. So the rich will just keep getting richer and the poor will keep getting poorer. But what does wealthy mean? The wealthy are the old people and the poor people are the younger people. And so really what it is a transfer. I got to give credit to Scott Galloway for kind of putting this thought in my head after listening to him speak, is this transfer from really not poor to wealthy, but really what it means is it's a transfer from young to old. And if we look at the philosophy that we're trying to instill, is we don't want to keep, we just, okay, take the money out, but what our value is the knowledge, right? If we're just going to keep the knowledge to ourselves and continue making ourselves better, it's so anti the philosophy of martial arts. It's like we need to empower and give the knowledge to the young people so then they can take that and move it forward. And that is a true, not just a martial art, Kung Fu, Wah Lum value, but I think that's a true, or should be a true American value.
Yeah.
How to implement that, I don't know.
Well, I mean, this is a perfect example of traditional, like what do we keep from the traditional side, and then what do we become flexible and adaptable about? Because there was a time where women weren't allowed to learn Kung Fu, or the Shaolin school would only stay and only teach the Shaolin monk people, right? Like there's some actual fact to some of these villages or family styles only teaching their people. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of secrets between teacher and disciple, and there was a lot of secrecy. And so this is why Grandmaster Chen said, no, USA Wah Lum means this. We open the doors for everyone to be able to learn. It is now accessible. It is now like, we want you to come. We're opening and inviting you in. All are welcome. Like that's what it said on the sign in the Wah Lum Temple when it opened. And it was like, that's not a quote unquote traditional value of like how martial arts initially started with like, these secret texts that are now buried under a mountain and we'll never find them. Like if we think about it, that was part of a tradition where women weren't allowed to learn Kung Fu because they would get married and take the secrets of the style away, right? But we're going, hey, this is the part where we keep tradition alive in a modern world and we say, yeah, no, we want to be able to allow everyone to be enriched, to learn, and to be a part of this. But here are the parts that we need to maintain, which is the core values in our philosophy and the hard work and keeping the art.
So here's something that it's going to sound like Oscar's on his soapbox, Oscar's pet peeves or whatever. But
let me get you a box.
Stand. If it could stay in camera frame, I would jump on it and I would start pointing down. But when you look at, okay, we're we're keeping tradition alive in a modern world, right? There's things you already mentioned that we're trying to adapt to, which is how we engage and interact with students, how we answer questions, how we treat whatever health issues they may have, whatever history they come with, and try to make that adaptable, as opposed to like, nope, you got to do this my way or the highway. That's one part where you're adaptable. Where I have maybe become even more strict, and I think you've always been this way, is with two really big things around the concept of respect, right? The first and one, I would say, is probably one of the most important parts of the philosophy, and that is good bowing gesture. Kung Fu bow. It's kind of just...
Wasn't even rehearsed, everybody.
It's kind of a...
It goes on video. We just bowed together.
It's literally like a light switch, right? It's you go into the room of Kung Fu, and if you don't bow, the light stays off. And if you bow, the light comes on, right? And it's the same when you interact with your Kung Fu brothers and sisters, and that part. And then the other part, and I think I've grown in this, is respecting titles or honorifics that we give people, right? So, obviously, your father, Grandmaster Chan. I still call him Sigong. I don't ever say... I would never call him Pui. That's crazy. I'm always like, oh yeah,
Father.
Sigong. Sifu.
One of my cousins always goes, Oscar, have you talked to Father?
Right. Your mother.
I don't call him Father.
Your mother, who's taught me Tai Chi. I don't call her mom either. I mean, that's still honoring her, right? But I call her Simo or C-mom sometimes, right? But
Mum.
Or Sifu. Like when you and I are in the school, I address you as Sifu Mimi. Sifu too, who is also one of my teachers, but it's weird. It's an interesting relationship, almost like an older brother. But I still address them as Sifu too. My Kung Fu brothers, who have come up and been honored as trained and became Sifu Jason, Sifu Mike now at the school, I address them that way. So something that I've noticed that is, maybe it's triggering for me, right? Is if I'm having a conversation with a student and they refer to you as Mimi, or they refer to Sifu 2 as 2, or God forbid it's happened, unfortunately a lot of Tai Chi students refer to your mom as Susie, I immediately go, you're not a serious student. I don't tell them that to their face. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm still nice and respectful.
Noted.
But in my mind,
column of students.
And I told you this already before, and you kind of laughed, like, this is the correlation you're making, but the TV show Succession, okay?
Which is quick seg. Fantastic show.
About horrible people.
Dark. about horrible people, but wow, what a fantastic show.
So the patriarch of the show, Logan Roy, is a horrible human being.
Horrible human being.
He's having a conversation with his children, who unfortunately, because of him, are also horrible.
Yes, they're all horrible.
They're discussing
But he knows how to get stuff done.
He knows how to get stuff done and how to be successful, okay?
Yes.
And so he's having a conversation with his children. And at the end, he goes, I love you, but you are not serious people. And serious people to take his company that he's built to where he wants it to be.
Right.
Whether that's a good place or a bad place.
To be the successor. But
when I hear any student do that, and even like a student who is in Kung Fu, and then we have, titles for our assistant instructors, Si Hing, CJ, and they'll say, oh yeah, I was just talking to Austin or Jake. And they don't say, it doesn't matter if this student has been with us for 10 days, 10 months, 10 years. I immediately go, you're not a serious student. In my mind, and the thing is, I will still coach them up, train them, treat them with respect. But in my mind, that light switch, in the same way that by me bowing and by me saying, like to your father, Sigong, Josan, and bowing every time that I see him, and that light switch goes on, when a student of ours, doesn't honor that part, a light switch goes off for me and that student. We're like, okay, they're not serious.
But you also correct it.
I correct it, but it's because I don't just shut it off. It's like, oh, they're not serious yet. I do kind of think that because I also have grown into this idea.
Cultural too,
and it's
right?
A cultural
so
thing.
I think what people get confused about, oh, you're asking me to call you like the master or
No.
whatever. But it's kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong, we've been out of school for a while, but students don't call their teachers by their first name. I think some teachers might have that kind of like cool guy relationship, whatever. But I don't know if you remember that silly 80s show, it's like head of the class where he's like, hi, my name is Mr. I can't even remember his now. Howard, you can call me by first name, Mr. And it's like, you know what? Because it puts you in the mode to call your teacher teacher, I'm here to learn. Like it automatically gives you the light switch because you're telling the person, teacher, teach me. Like by you addressing your teacher by the proper Chinese term, and it's so hard to explain. And I'm not even a native Chinese speaker. I am American. I'm Jamaican, whatever, you're born Jamaican. Like my mom's very Jamaican, even though she has a Chinese background. But like for me, it's like understanding the way the Chinese language works, the way the Chinese familial dynamic works. You would never call your grandparent by their main name. You also have to call them by like the paternal side, the maternal side, proper title. It's not about like kowtowing and making someone feel like they're on this pedestal. It is just such a gesture of respect, but also it puts you in like, I am here to learn now. I am open to learning. My brain is turned on. My heart is open to learning, and I am humble. I have humility. So when you address your teacher by their proper title, quote unquote, I think that's just the wrong word for it. I think if you just address your Siheng, your older Kung Fu brother, your Sijie, your older Kung Fu sister, your Sifu, which is almost like a parent, a teacher, a mentor, you're like, I'm here to learn from you. That's what you're saying. When you bow, you're not like I said, like, oh, you're so mighty and you're the king and my head has to be below you and it's some kind of power trip. It is you coming and saying, I am a student of Wah Lum and I am here and I am ready to learn. You bow in and you say, teacher, teach me. Like, this is kind of silly because I'm sure in Shaolin versus Wu-Tang or any of those Shaw Brothers movies, you've heard someone go, teacher, teach me, please. Well, and because in Chinese, it's Sifu. Will you take me as a disciple? You have to address them like that because otherwise, how do we know you're a serious student?
Yeah. So it's you say it very. That's all excellently said, and I think the challenge is in that word. Sometimes people think master, but you're right. People need to realize what it is. It's not this kowtowing. It's I've grown to look at it as, someone like Sifu too, when he's teaching me a form, has so much knowledge. Every single time I'm like, thank you, Sifu. Regardless if before that we were joking around spending 3 hours cutting down bamboos, right? Which we did. But it's this thing of like, wow, I respect all the knowledge that you have and that you've acquired, but I also respect that you're giving me knowledge and training me. And that the challenge for me is not if someone, immediately if someone says it regarding you or him, I go, yeah, that's Sifu Mimi to you or Sifu 2 to you, or hey, by the way, that's, either Sifu Suzy or Grandmaster Chan, right? The challenge is, and probably people of my generation, like my Kung Fu brothers, have the same thing, is knowing that we also have to be humble. So if a student comes up to me and says, oh, Oscar, and doesn't say Sifu Oscar, my first instinct is, well, I got to calm my ego down. But then in the background, there's this scratching thing of like, oh, they're not saying Sifu. That's not a serious student. But it's then fighting with the ego part, right? It's like both things kind of battling each other out. And so what's been winning overall is, oh, you're not a serious student, right? Yet, it's not, are some of the most respectful, decent people. All I'm saying is I immediately go, oh, you're just not a serious student yet. Mm-hmm. I got it. I see you. You're a great person. It's literally, that's why I love that line from that show, because it's, I love you. You are just not a serious student.
So this also, I think our listeners anyway kind of can understand and I really hope my youngsters are listening to this, because I'm sure they're cringing, like thinking about addressing their instructors by their first name only, because we have had the time to properly train them and introduce them and explain it. It takes time to learn a culture and to understand it and to recognize. One of my parents of one of the little Mantis kids, the 5-year-olds, how do you get these teenagers to show up to Kung Fu? Are they here every day? She's so curious because of course it's sometimes dragging your child into Kung Fu or whatever sport or whatever music class. It's like such challenge. And like, how do you get people to want to do this? And it's like, actually, if you are trying to become a better human and you're actually genuinely trying to make them better humans and you're giving so much energy and effort to taking the time to share. This is the meaning of Sifu. You earn the title of Sihing CJ at our school in particular. We have our assistants kind of have that so that they're the, Mr. So-and-so in the room. And it's clear. It's clear, especially for kids. You have that, you immediately get a certain amount of respect because you're like, okay, we know they're kind of empowered by the temple. But you earn that title, quote unquote, because that means you're older than someone there. Right? That means you actually put in time. It means you're someone's older sibling.
Right.
In Kung Fu, a Kung Fu older sibling. So that means you've earned that because you've put in time. And that's something that someone new should recognize. Wow, even if this person isn't like the main teacher, they've put in time to be there. And so when you put in time and you've earned something, it means more. And to earn the Sifu title in Wah Lum, to earn a Sifu, to be able to say Sifu before your name is quite a journey. It is not an easy thing. You cannot come in and pay for the black belt program, not to disparage other styles that maybe do this, but there is no shortcut to becoming a Wah Lum Sifu. So anyone out there that has earned that and has worked towards it has put in a minimum of a decade, possibly 2 decades. I think everybody I know in my mind has put in at least 2 decades before they become Sifus. And then it's even more of a journey after that. And then it's like starting over. Yeah. And we were just talking to my Kung Fu brothers, Sifu Leroy is like, oh, I've been in this for like 40 years, but I still feel like the baby in the room. And you start to look around and you go, oh, wait, there's so many younger Sifus and things like that. But if you can keep the mindset of always thinking you're the young one in the room because you have more to learn, you're always going to be in the right place. And another misconception in how do we walk this fine line of keeping tradition alive in a modern world? Like, I think something very difficult for those not growing up in a traditional, I would even say Asian household, not just Chinese, is questioning your parent, questioning things all the time. And there is room for flexibility of saying, hey, I have a question. But then the part that is traditional is Grandmaster Chan always says you need to research. Now, don't take this as go onto YouTube and start watching all these videos of all these quote unquote experts. I will tell you what, I don't see very many Grandmasters on YouTube teaching all their traditional, not real Grandmasters, teaching their style or like just giving away all of their years of knowledge because they want serious students. They don't want virtual fans or students or people out there that are just, unfortunately maybe don't have access, but they want serious students. Traditional martial artists really want serious students, which means you show up. You show up to the temple. You show up to your school. You show up and you do the work. Like that is something that's kind of instilled. So he always says you research, meaning you spend hours practicing on your own. We never asked questions growing up in the classroom. I mean, there's, like a little room for growth, right? A little room for like making sure we don't injure ourselves or do something wrong. But 90, maybe more % of the time, if we actually just kept doing the work, that question, that quote unquote shortcut would have been answered through the work. And it is the actual shortcut. So doing the work is actually the shortcut versus just trying to get the answer, because if you don't learn it yourself, you don't retain it the same way. So if I just give you the answer to what you think your question is about a form or a movement or an application, yes, sometimes if you've done the work, then I can get you there faster. But if I just tell you without you doing any work, it's not gonna be absorbed in the same way. I don't know if I'm articulating this well.
So the way that you learn is through random, and I'm not a good learner because I don't remember the terminology, but basically you have to continuously keep testing yourself. So there is
instant recall.
Recall is huge. And so there are certain parts of my martial arts training that I think I've gotten good at. And then there's certain parts that are really lacking. And the reason is because of my relationship with you, with Sifu 2, a lot of times I do ask you questions. I try not to do it as much anymore, but let's say even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would continuously ask questions and get the answer that I was looking for. and I should have been researching it on my own and then come back and say, hey, is this what the answer is? Right? As opposed to, hey, what is the answer?
And I think we need to reframe research for our listeners, because that's probably my dad's translation, not working out.
Research means
practice.
So
it means practice and discover yourself.
Yes.
Practice, discover your limitations. Practice and discover your strengths. Practice and discover you, your body, who you are. Those of you who are always getting injured out there, the reason you do is because you haven't put in the numbers to be able to say, hey, here's what I should be doing. Here's where I've moved wrong, and now I know not to do that, right? You just go. Like, you have to practice with intent, just like we ask you to move with intention. To be a true traditional martial artist, you need to practice with intention and you need to move with intention. And I think the intention part is often missing.
Yeah, so then it makes me think of my own training of, there are times where I was, let's say, learning a traditional form.
Yes.
And I was working on it and I forgot, and I immediately be like, hey, what is this move again? And you'd be like, and you showed me, right? And just recently, Sifu 2 was showing me some moves, right, from this plum flower form. And I was just practicing them. And then he would come back out and be like, no, do this. But I didn't ask him any questions. I just kept working on it. And then the next week, he saw me working on it and he goes, okay. And then he showed me the next move, just one move. And that is the very traditional way of doing it.
Yeah,
which is
because we've seen you put the work in, and now we feel you're ready.
And seeing you kind of working it out and also fail, right? And go, nope, that's not right. And the thing about it is, this is where I think our pendulum keeps swinging, right? But it always has to keep coming back, is in our effort as instructors and new instructors to be better for the students, we may have overcorrected by over-explaining and over-answering and finding the right phrasing for all of these thoughts that you just, and ideas that you just said, is of like, no, you've got to just keep working on it. Like, I had this conversation with one of our students the other day, and I was like, this is crazy, the amount of questions we're getting. Like, your generation, for you, Sifu 2, like that generation, I always ask, like, how many times did you ask Master Chan a question? And it's like, there's never an answer. It's only wide eyes. What? No, we just had to keep working. When we went to the Shaolin Temple and learned this traditional Shaolin form, this amazing martial artist was showing it to us. And then he was like, let me show you the application. And he showed the application and he goes, now, that application, it's me, my research. I just kept practicing, kept thinking about it. My Sifu never taught me this part. And I always remember that, because that means that he was trained the traditional way. Here, follow along, do this. Okay, practice.
Oh, we've learned from other people that weren't as good. And
Exactly.
You could tell
and you
exactly
tell.
why, because they hadn't put their numbers in.
They haven't put the numbers in.
Way.
And so
different coaches.
The challenge is, and this is our fault as instructors, because I'm talking about myself as well. I've relied a lot of times on asking questions that haven't put in the work in certain parts. In certain parts I did put a lot of work in some parts I haven't. And we need to find a way to bring this back to our students of like, yes, we're here to coach you and to teach you, but we're not here to give you every single answer. Like, this is so philosophical and fortune cookie, but you have to like go on the path yourself and do it and do the work. And then the thing is, you'll never be 100% right. But by you going on the path, you may be 80% better. And then that extra 20%, that's when your Sifu comes in or your coach and says, hey, here are things to work on. But if you rely only on getting the answer, then you're going to be just better on that, which is like a 10% improvement.
And also, that isn't going to be as good as it could have been had you just put in some time. I think students get a little caught up in, then I'm practicing it wrong. I was like, how many times have we told students that Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Chinese martial arts, especially Wah Lum, goes deep, right? So you're going to learn something, and next year you're going to go deeper into that. And the next year you're going to go deeper into that technique, and so on and so on. 20, 30, 20 plus years of Wah Lum, you're still discovering things that you learned in year one.
Oh, there is
because that is what we do. We literally will say, hey, guess what? 20 years in, now I think you're ready to discover this, but we don't actually tell you the answer. You're doing it and you're like, hey, I just realized this. We're like, oh, good, you learned that now.
Or something that I've noticed a lot is you or some of the other more senior instructors would be saying something that's super simple, but it's about something that I've practiced on my own for 20 years. And then you saying that, I go, oh, I never thought of it. Obviously, probably have said it before, but that's when I was ready to receive it. And I think this kind of can be tied back to this whole showing the students the respect part of the bowing and then honoring of the titles part is, I guess I have to think about it as it is also new for them, and it might feel weird for them if they've never bowed. That might actually feel weird. Saying Sifu might actually feel weird. On one side, it could be like, no, I'm too cool to do that, but maybe also it's like, no, that's actually kind of a different thing. I'm just not used to doing, and so part of the job of a Sifu, a coach, a teacher is to teach, and the things we need to teach are not just the moves, but also the philosophies behind it.
I think one thing we haven't, and we can kind of wrap with this, discussed is that when you bow in and you say, Sifu, I'm here to train, ready to go, is you are also signing a bit of a contract, and you're saying, I trust you. You're my teacher. I trust you. And your teacher says, I trust you to learn. And so there's mutual trust in you are showing up open and ready to learn because you have respect, you have humility, you have an open mind and heart. And then the teacher will say, oh, I see you as a serious student. And now I'm ready to teach you because I can feel that you trust me by showing respect and being open and ready. So it's like the student has to show up, but they also have to show up with intention. Like just walking in the door is not enough. Walking in the door with the respect, having the light switch on, showing the humility and fellowship and kindness and being a serious student at Wah Lum makes the teachers go, oh, they're ready to learn. And when we see them before class working on their numbers, going through movements and trying to get it, 2 weeks later, and I see it has improved, but now I'm like, oh, I think they're ready for this corrective. The common mistake new instructors have is overcorrecting and thinking that I need to tell them every single thing that's wrong right now.
To show them that I know things. And I need to
show them. I think it's also, I don't want them to do it wrong at all, and I want to fix every single little thing. And it's like you have to know what the capacity of your student is. And if the student trusts the teacher, your Sifu, your Sihing, your CJ, then you don't need to ask questions, except if like you feel like, hey man, this is like hurting my ankle. Am I doing something wrong? And then we can go, oh, move your foot or something like that, right? But if it's more of like, oh, just show me the next move or show me how this goes. I was just like, well, let's see what you do with the next 5 minutes first. Because this is the thing. We're not even talking like years or weeks of training. We're talking you leave someone for 5 minutes and they can't even practice on their own for 5 minutes and they have like 50 questions. I go, that is not a serious student.
Well, not just that.
Yeah, they don't understand. So I think you have to remember you need to trust in your teacher. You need to trust your Sifu that they know when you are ready. If you show up and you show that you're a serious student, then you need to trust that your Sifu will give you the corrections, will teach you when you're ready, when you are open and ready to learn.
Yeah, so this is kind of valuable for instructors as well because those things that are happening a lot of times subconsciously, right? Where
I think most everyone has good intentions.
But I mean, even on the instructor side.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Right, it's like this subconscious of like, oh, well, why is that person getting more attention? Well, they're getting more attention because the instructor sees how hard they're working. Not necessarily more attention, but okay, let's move on. And what happens is if you learn a certain technique and then you ask, hey, how does this technique go? You get the answer and now you're ready for the next, you think you're ready for the next one. And you're not because you still don't have that instant recall. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Everything that you said made me think of like, man, I'm still failing at this. Not all the time, but I would say that I'm not batting, like they say in baseball, 3 out of 10 is like a Hall of Famer. I don't think I'm even at a 3 out of 10,
Wow.
So, which is pretty bad, right? So I think that I catch myself either overcorrecting, wanting to impart things. And this is the value of saying a lot of these things out loud is you realize always, oh, okay, it's me first that I'm talking about. And then that allows you then to, with humility, go try to help other people understand all that. And in essence, make Wah Lum better, which will hopefully make Orlando better, Florida better, the United States better.
World peace.
And then ending in world peace, yeah.
Yeah, I love that we were able to kind of bring all of this around in this, short podcast because I think it's something that subconsciously is on people's minds, but also they don't even know the question to ask, to go, well, why is this, or why is that, or what is the dynamic? And I think we take for granted that when people sign up, they understand the arrangement, the agreement that's being made. It's like, oh, you're going to be a serious student, and then you will trust me as your teacher and know, like, we want the best for you, and this is what we're going to offer and enrich you with, and give you our knowledge. But that also still has to be earned. This is the traditional modern line that we're always walking, is like people think they come in, well, I'm paying tuition, therefore I'm a customer. I was like, not at the Wah Lum Temple. We don't have customers.
We have students.
We have students who are applying to be a serious student, and that's the intention. And so we have to do the best job possible of communicating what that expectation is. And it is our fault when we don't set expectations properly. But it's a work in progress. I think we are all a work in progress, and none of us are perfect. And we shouldn't necessarily even strive for perfection, but we need to continuously strive to be better, even if it's just 1% better every day.
Yeah, that comment of like the type of students that we're looking for reminds me of what my coach said. And I'm Brett Jones, he said something about, because it is also a business, right? He goes, well, you make your money on, showing certain things, or you start your thing on showing certain things, but then you make the money on the corrections. It was something to that effect, but what it makes me think of really more is we still have a lot of students who are where we want them to be exposed, right? So we're going to have a huge probably percentage of students that we want them to be exposed to it, but it probably is always going to be a smaller percentage of students who are actually serious. And we also have to be okay with that. So the thing I'm saying here is that we're happy to have all of the students. We want you to come in with the intention of being serious, but we also have to realize, like, not all of them are going to be. It's like a funnel.
Now,
right?
If any Wah Lum students are actually listening, they're like, dang it, challenge accepted, peacock feathers open. I'm going to be the serious student.
I'm not.
And they're all going to come up, Sifu Oscar, am I a serious student? Am I the one you were talking about on this podcast?
I would be crazy to assume that more than 2 or 3 of our students listen to this. So I don't think anyone's going to come up to me.
Putting it in the newsletter. Oh, yeah, they don't read that
They
either.
don't read that. So I guess what I'm saying is even after all this, is I have to also realize that it is a funnel, right? Like, we want to expose as many people to it, but to be serious takes so much time and dedication. There's so many distractions that we also have to realize that, realistically, the serious ones will be less than the masses. Ideally, it wouldn't be, but that's just the way it is.
And I think this philosophy of Grandmaster Chan's, which is, if there's one person that is in the crowd you're performing for, or 1 million or 1,000 or 10,000, you still give 100%. You still give the best performance of your life. If there's 3 students in class, or 30 students in class, or 50 students in class, you still go up there and you give a good class. You still give with the same intention that you would, because literally that one person can be impacted and can therefore then go out and continue sharing the good energy and the good philosophy and being better, and then being better in society, and also kind of paying it forward. Like what we're doing, like you said earlier about, hey, if we were just going to be greedy with our knowledge, then I'm just going to die with, not that I have all this knowledge, but I'm just going to be like, well, no one's going to learn all of this then. But it still has to be earned, right? So, but the point is for future generations. So coming back to American values and traditional Chinese martial art values, it means bettering future generations so that they can then continue to invest in future generations and equipping them with discipline and humility and respect and kindness and the resilience to basically do good in the world. So,
the end.
All right. Well, hopefully that rant, no, it wasn't much of a rant. I think that our Mimi's musings, hopefully this episode resonated with some of you. If it did, we would actually love to hear feedback. But also for our Wah Lum members, just remember, if you're not a serious student, Sifu Oscar says, yet, you can still be a serious student.
Listen, if you're not a serious student, all I say, noted. Noted. You're not serious, but I will still smile. I will still bow when I see you. I will still try my hardest to teach, but I just go noted. You're just not serious. That's all.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. Again, if you love this podcast, the coolest thing you can do is maybe share an episode you like, and also you can rate it. And if you really, really, really want to show love, this does take a lot of effort. There are technical things that need to happen, and becoming a patron of the show, I'm going to just shamelessly shout out that we have so many wonderful ones that have really kept us going. When I say so many, I mean a handful of wonderful, amazing humans that believe in the work I'm doing, not just through this podcast, but all of the things. And so thank you so much. I appreciate you. I bow to you. And if you want to be one of those, you can. So patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. And until next time, everybody, peace out.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.